Hi, this is Christina at Cemetery of Choice. Today's September 13th, and it's the anniversary of the day that Eileen Smith and her husband Tom got the phone call that their daughter Laura had just been brought to the hospital dead from an abortion. And I have a video queued up that I've never seen before that I'm going to watch with you, and I'm going to add information I know that's relevant to other abortion deaths or additional information I have about Laura's death. But for the most part, I'm going to let Eileen tell her story.
Well, my daughter in the summer before September in '07 spent the summer with us down the Jersey Shore. My husband brought her back to Cape Cod where she was living. Her fiance had just gotten shipped off to Iraq, and she was a bit homesick, and so we were thrilled to have her for that summer. But what she did when she went home was go to an abortion clinic within the first week and died on the table having an abortion. We had no idea that she was pregnant. She didn't share it with me because I think she knew what she was going to do, and she knows how I feel about it. Ironically, Laura was pro-life and Laura was anti-abortion.
This is something that is really important. The abortion lobby holds up pro-life women having abortions as some kind of proof that they recognize that abortion is necessary, but they only want to allow it for themselves. What it actually shows is the normal psychology of pregnancy. And this has been known, I saw papers written back in the 1950s, and there was a Dr. Alec Bourne in the UK who broke the law by doing an abortion on a 15-year-old girl who'd been raped by a soldier because he wanted to loosen the abortion laws. And he later wrote that it was really a bad idea to over loosen the laws because a lot of women would be adamant early on that they wanted an abortion, and he would tell them, no, let's just ride out this early period, and they would be grateful that they didn't have the abortion. Because the normal psychology of pregnancy involves, first of all, accepting the fact that you really are pregnant. It has to sink in because this is such a momentous life event that it's kind of stunning. And abortion clinic sales are designed to take advantage of that. They will talk to the woman as if the abortion will make this all go away and it will never have happened. And when the woman is in that state of unreality, she might just grab at that. Yeah, this is going to make this whole thing go away like it's never happened. Then comes affiliation with the baby. And the original articles I saw were written back before ultrasounds were common. And generally the turning point for women who had initial abortion ideation was when they felt the baby move. That made the baby become real, and they turned into just as much of a mama bear as any other mother. And now that happens when they hear the heartbeat or see the baby on ultrasound, which is why pro-lifers keep passing laws wanting the abortion clinics to have to at least offer to let them see the ultrasound or hear the heartbeat, which I think is a wrong approach, but that's an entirely different video. But the abortion clinic does not want the woman even knowing that there's a heartbeat, because that will make her bond with the baby, and once she bonds with the baby, she'll change her mind. So this stress of early pregnancy, when the woman's pregnant in a bad situation, she goes into fight or flight mode. And you know, when you are really scared and you're in that flight or fight mode, you aren't making the decision, your fear is. And what they're doing is they are leveraging this fear into an abortion sale. And the closest thing I can compare it to, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was kind of hippy-dippy and wanted to do the whole natural childbirth thing. And I went to my prepared childbirth classes, and I'm in labor, and I started just having horrible spasms and dry heaves from the pain. And I started begging for drugs. And Pam, the midwife, who was about 6 months pregnant, I felt kind of sorry for her, spent about an hour talking to me. She said, look, your value system is that you want a natural childbirth. My experience has been that women whose values were that they wanted a natural childbirth, and then I give them lots of drugs, they regret it later. So let's talk through this so that it's you making the decision and not the pain making the decision. But these abortion clinics will take that fear and pain and use it as a sales tactic. It's not proof that women need abortions. It's proof that their sales tactics are taking advantage of some deep psychological phenomena, that it's really a shady, underhanded, disgusting thing for them to do.
Until it happened to her.
Now, Laura's your daughter.
Yes, yes. And
Now, was she a Christian?
yes, she was. She was a Christian.
This is another point. Abortion clinics consider Christian women to be trophies. They love it when they can sell an abortion to a Christian woman. And Planned Parenthood actually hires Christian clergy and have them put out materials that it's not saying you need to speak with people who are leaders in your religious faith. It's, oh no, abortion's great, abortion's fine, go for it, go for it. God's going to love you doing this. He wants you to make this choice. They deliberately target Christian women to sell them abortions because it makes them feel this little victory.
I know that you may not have all of these answers, but how does this happen to a Christian girl who was brought up in a family that didn't believe in any of these things?
That's
These weren't
right.
her values.
Very active in church.
How did this
her whole
happen?
life? That's the answer I don't have. Laura was also adopted. We adopted her when she was 4 years old. She was adopted, pro-life, Christian, and engaged. All the reasons that she should have kept the child. But I don't have those answers. I have my suspicions, and I think when I see God, it's not going to matter. Those questions won't even matter. But
Well, praise God for Jesus and
Amen.
forgiveness, man. If
Amen.
it wasn't for that, we'd all be dead.
right.
But I know that this is bound to have affected you tremendously.
There's before Laura died and after Laura died, it changed our whole lives. It affected everything. It really did.
And I'm sure that one of the things that Satan uses to suck people into this is to think, well, it's my own body. This is just me affecting myself, which, of course, is
Yes.
untrue. You got a child inside
That's
of
one
you,
of the
but
lies.
they don't even think about their family
No.
members and the other people that are affected.
Part of the reason I feel is
The family members. This is something, my copy of Our Bodies and Ourselves in the chapter about abortion, they have some examples of women making empowered choices and doing it the right way. And one of them was this family that had 2 sons and a daughter. And they were thinking of aborting baby number 4. So they had a family meeting with the children. And they talked about how we can have the baby or mommy can have an abortion. If mommy has the baby, we won't be able to afford to buy you new bikes every year. Somebody's going to have to share a bedroom. We won't be able to take as many ski trips. So what do you want? And the boys were voting for abortion, and the little girl was crying and pleading for the life of her siblings, saying, I don't want another new bike ever. I don't have to ever go skiing again. I can sleep on the floor. I don't need a bedroom. Just please don't kill the baby. But she was outvoted, so they had the abortion. Now, what do you think that did to that child? But they held that up as an example of how you should handle an abortion decision, dragging your kids into it. And then having the abortion in the face of this child weeping and crying and begging for her sibling's life. It's disgusting.
it's because the church is silent and Planned Parenthood is very vocal.
Yes, and which says the church is silent, it's not just, the church will do this, abortion's bad, abortion's bad, abortion's bad, but they do not abortion-proof the kids. And it is possible. I abortion-proofed my daughter. I talked to her about the psychology of pregnancy and how everything you believe and all your values go out the window when you are scared out of your mind like that. And when she got pregnant at a bad time, she's like, fall back and regroup. Right now, fight or flight. I'm going to regret this later. And I've tried to get churches to develop a curriculum with me, but it's kind of like a just say no to drugs. They talk about why it's wrong, but they don't talk about how it's marketed to you and how you can get sucked into doing something that you would otherwise never even consider.
The secular society is very vocal. And as you mentioned, you were saying getting an abortion is like getting a manicure. They don't tell you about the deaths of mothers. Of course, everyone knows a child dies during an abortion, but there's over 450 reported deaths since Roe v. Wade. More women are dying now in legal abortion than died before when it was illegal.
Really?
I don't think her numbers are necessarily right. The thing is, we don't know how many women are dying now. Because the way, back before legalization, an abortion death, if the mother died, that was homicide, that was murder, that was a big freaking deal. You couldn't just be writing any old thing on the death certificate and it flies. I've done case after case after case where family members, neighbors, undertakers, clerks at the health department report these abortion deaths. And the health department would very, very vigorously pursue doctors asking, have you treated anybody who died from an abortion, so that they could get the numbers as accurately as possible. And I've written an article about comparing the numbers they found with these intensive studies versus the 5,000 to 10,000 claim, which is absolutely bogus, and they've known it was bogus since the 1940s. But they stopped looking vigorously for abortion deaths in about the mid-1970s. When abortion was first legalized, the head honchos at the abortion surveillance branch of the CDC were Willard Cates and David Grimes, and I have to give them credit for taking this seriously. But I think they were trying to prove that legalization was going to be sunshine and unicorns. And instead, they found that there wasn't a change. The number of abortion deaths annually was falling, and all that happened was legal abortion deaths were replacing most of, but not all of, the illegal abortion deaths. Because as the CDC found out, women still pursue illegal abortions for what they call idiosyncratic reasons. Sometimes women are immigrants from a culture where this is just something that the women do, self-induced abortions. There was a woman in California who actually had an appointment for a safe legal abortion. She was a systems analyst for a defense contractor. So she was not poor, she was not uneducated. She had an appointment at an abortion clinic. She let her boyfriend use a piece of aquarium tubing on her, and she wound up dying. So, but Cates and Grimes originally, in the very early 1970s, when it was just some states legalizing, they sent out letters to every emergency department and every OBGYN. Do you know about any abortion deaths? And if they didn't get a response, they would send a follow-up letter. They were very aggressive. But in about the mid-1970s, they switched to a very passive system where now the various states, and I spent 6 months researching this when I was at Life Dynamics. I contacted every state health department and vital records office in the United States, including New York City, District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. I mean, I was thorough with this. And what happens is that they take a sample of their death data and they send it to the National Center for Health Statistics. And then the National Center for Health Statistics then extrapolates from that. So I don't know numbers. I'm just going to give you an example to illustrate. Let's say that Texas sends 10% of their death data, and the CDC sees 40 deaths from COPD. They wouldn't say, oh, in all of Texas there were 40 deaths from COPD. They'd say, well, this is 10% of the deaths, and it was 40. That means there were 400 deaths from COPD. They don't do that with abortion. If they get one abortion death, they count that as all abortion deaths for that entire state. It's kind of the equivalent of putting a bushel basket in an orchard, and then there's a windstorm, and you count the apples that fell into the basket and claim that that is all the apples that fell from the entire tree. Okay? They're not getting them all. And even if the abortion death was on a death certificate that was sampled and sent, the coding kind of hides it. And later on I might do a video about that. But we don't know how many legal abortion deaths there are. My best guess is that, you know, it's hovering at around 10 a year. That's just eyeballing it from all these years of doing research. So, it's not more, think there were 40 in 1970, and there's about 10 now. And of course, abortion rights organizations go, that's because abortion was legalized and it became sunshine and unicorns. No, that's because antibiotics and better treatment and blood transfusions, yada, 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 it was falling already. It had been falling since the 1940s. So, you know, it didn't retroactively prevent death. It just replaced illegal abortion deaths with legal abortion deaths, and I don't see any advantage to the woman dying from a legal abortion as opposed to an illegal one. In fact, it kind of seems to me worse because it's more of a betrayal. If she's seeking out an illegal abortion, she knows she's doing something that could be dangerous to her. If she's going into a safe and legal, freely operating, openly operating clinic, she's going in with the expectation that this is going to be performed professionally and that she's safe. So there's that layer of betrayal on top of the death. So really, because it adds that betrayal to the mix, I feel like, in a way, dying from a legal abortion is actually worse because it's got that added just stabber in the back on top of everything else.
Is that just because of the increased amount of abortions? Or?
Yeah, probably.
But it's still not a totally safe procedure, and sometimes you'll be told things like that.
Not at all. Not at all.
Now, as far as the procedure itself, it's not inherently risky. Okay, because if it was, Kermit Gosnell would have had women just falling down dead in the street outside the clinic. He wouldn't have 2 deaths linked to him. He'd have 20 or 30 or 40. The fact that some of these guys can be as quacky as they are and the women still survive, it's not that it's inherently dangerous, it's that there is so much quackery that's tolerated. These women don't need to die. The all surgery has risks. I very rarely see an abortion death where I look at it and go, the all surgery has risks. Vanessa Preston in Dallas, and I think it was 1982 or 83, seemed to be all surgery has risks. Curtis Boyd and his staff seem to do if you're willing to grant that they meant well by doing the abortion in the first place, they quickly noticed that she was in trouble. They had emergency protocols. They instituted the emergency protocols, and she died from what's called disseminated intravascular coagulopathy. Disseminated intravascular coagulopathy, which is a clotting disorder, and the blood can either clot too much or just stop clotting. And when they did CPR on her, there's a broken rib, a liver laceration. This happens even with properly performed CPR. This is not that they botched the CPR. But they didn't realize that a woman could get amniotic fluid embolism, which would cause DIC and cause her to bleed out. And Boyd did write an article warning other abortion practitioners about that. So I would definitely count her as a look, all surgery has risks, these things happen. But most of them, no. Most of them, they have no excuse for letting this woman die.
At all. A lot of girls have been maimed for life in many different physical areas of their body.
Maimed for life. Colostomies, hysterectomies, losing limbs. Yes, that happens. The sepsis sets in and they wind up losing limbs. Now, Carolina Gutierrez lost all 4 limbs. She became a quadruple amputee before she finally died. But you can imagine that there's got to be other women who lost limbs from sepsis that didn't die, that you don't know about. There's catastrophic brain injury. Christy Style languished for decades before she died. Suzanne Logan was left mute and paralyzed in a nursing home for several years before she died. Venus Ortiz was in a coma before she died for years. There's other cases. And there was one case that Life Dynamics took right before I went to work there that it really pissed us off. It's a 12-year-old girl whose mother brought her to an openly operating, safe and legal clinic in New York. The family did not know that technically the abortion was illegal because she was past 25 weeks. They botched it. A clot went into her brain, damaged the optic area. This little girl wound up with a hysterectomy and blind. And when the family sued, the defense the clinic used was the girl was committing a crime by having an illegal abortion, so she wasn't entitled to any recompense. So this 12-year-old girl left infertile and blind. And they just leveraged their law breaking to leave her without even any financial compensation to make up for her additional expenses because of these injuries. So, you know, and we don't know. We don't know the complication rates because all the studies on complication rates come from abortion clinics, and abortion clinics are notorious for falsifying documentation. I talked the other day about Inglewood Women's Hospital, where an inspector was on the premises and the doctor was doing post-op exams by a staffer would point to the woman and he'd sign off on it. They had the Center for Reproductive and Sexual Health in New York that charted a dead patient as pink alert responsive. And it's because they were charting the post-op before she even went into the procedure room. And a lot of clinics get caught doing this. So when you get these complication rates, you're getting them from people who are motivated to lie through their teeth. You would have to look at Scandinavian countries where they have socialized medicine and all of the medical records are electronically tracked. That's where you're going to get accuracy from, not from stuff you get from abortion clinics in the U.S.
A lot of women are sterilized by abortion. It's a horrific, horrific thing that is covered up and made medicinal and made sanitary and made pretty, and by the medical field, by the secular, by education. Do you know they can take your little child for an abortion, a minor, and not tell the parent in several states? They can take
The Dawn Ravenel in New York, she was 13 years old. And I think I can remember verbatim what her mother said. She got a call from St. Luke's. I got a call from St. Luke's telling me to come there right away, that Dawn is at the hospital fighting for her life. I was going, how can she be fighting for her life? She left for school this morning looking healthy, never been sick. It wasn't until she got to the hospital that she found out about the abortion. Because I kept telling myself, this is a bad dream, I'm going to wake up. And Dawn was in a coma for about 2 weeks before she died. And the school had arranged that abortion. The 15-year-old boyfriend borrowed a relative's credit card. The school arranged the abortion. The school brought her to the clinic behind her parents' backs. This happens. Imagine getting that phone call.
them out of school for an abortion.
Well, I've seen some movies and documentaries, things made of girls that are 12, 13 years
Absolutely.
old getting
Absolutely.
an abortion, and there's no way that a
Oh, the other thing is doing abortions on 12 and 13-year-old girls at the behest of men who are raping them. Sometimes stepbrothers, foster brothers, fathers, stepfathers, and they don't report the child sex abuse. They just do the abortion and send the girl home for more abuse, and he brings her back for more abortions, and nobody cares. Nobody but the pro-lifers and the family that aren't the abusers care.
person like that should be making a decision, but
No.
these Planned Parenthoods will take you in and give you an abortion.
And not tell the parent
I
that the
think
child
that's
was even
terrible.
pregnant. It's obscene. It's horrible.
And of course, Laura's very story shows that it is not totally a safe procedure.
No, it's not.
Do you know exactly what went wrong? What happened?
Absolutely. I moved up there and I never went home for 8 months. I had to do the research. I pressed the DA to do an investigation. I got a lawyer. I went to the medical board. I just became researching abortions, anesthesia, autopsies. I mean, I was totally ignorant. There's a lot of people in the medical field in my family. I wasn't one of them, but I got a horrible education in the truth of abortion. And I was nonstop. In fact, my own lawyer said, Eileen, there's never been an abortionist to go to jail. I believe that man killed my daughter. And I said, well, if that's true, I'll be the first. And I was. I got the abort. I took his license.
There have been other abortionists that went to jail for killing women in safe and legal abortions. It has to be some pretty egregious malpractice, and it is rare, considering how often I think the malpractice really warrants it. Like Sylvia Moore, I think it was New Year's Eve of 1985 or 1986. I can't remember if the 1986 was the year she died or the year she went in for the abortion, but I think she was 17 years old. She was hemorrhaging. She was too weak to even walk. And, what was his name? I can see his face, but I can't remember his name. The abortionist, I'll remember his name, put her in a wheelchair and shoved her out the door. Arnold Bickham. She was too weak to walk. He put her in a wheelchair, shoved her out the door, and her mother took her to the hospital, but it was too late. She had already bled out so much. They tried to save her, but they couldn't. And the manner of death on autopsy was found to be homicide, but he was never prosecuted for it.
Away, I got him put in jail, albeit he went to jail for 3 months, which was a travesty. And the jail he went to looked like a bed and breakfast. You would never know it was a prison, but the fact that he went to jail, that I shut him down, that he could no longer kill babies. I met with him in person about 10 days after my daughter died, and he would only meet me in public. He wouldn't let my husband accompany me. And I just prayed, and I said, God, what should I say to this man? After I got all the questions, medical questions and answers, and I felt like he was lying on every answer. And then when I said, God, is there anything else I should say to him? And out of my mouth came these words. I said, the blood of my daughter is on your hands. The blood of my grandchild is on your hands. The blood of every baby you have killed is on your hands. And if you don't repent and turn to life, the God of life, you will stand before one day and answer for every life you've taken.
What was his response?
He said, Mrs. Smith, I grew up around Presbyterians. I know those stories about your God. I said, you may know the story, but you don't know the God. Because if you knew my God, you could never do what you do. And I asked him on the life and death of my daughter if he would consider ending his abortion career. And he said he would think about it. And as he left me, I couldn't shake his hand, I couldn't touch him, I knew what those hands did for a living. But he said he would consider it. And I had an assurance from God that he was going to stop doing abortions. I thought the man was going to get a conscience. But that wasn't the case. 4 months after my daughter died, because of my work with the medical board and their investigation, he was practicing worse than third world medicine in his doctor's office. And I was able to shut him down.
Wow. That is hard to believe that that's going on. So apparently all of his abortions didn't end in the death of the woman. Do you know what went wrong with your daughter?
Yes. My daughter died the same way Michael Jackson did, which most people know. She was given the drug propofol, which took away her lung capability to breathe. But he did not have any oxygen on her. He did not have any monitoring of anesthesia. He was doing an anesthesia in a doctor's office that should have only been done in a hospital. He had no pulse oximeter on her that monitored her heartbeat. And he did the abortion and went on to the last abortion of the day. The only other person in the office was called the handholder. He left a high school graduate to resuscitate my daughter. She was 44 years old, but her level of education was high school. And she put the pulse oximeter on, it flatlined. Then she got another machine and she's banging it and put it on and it was flatlined. She thought the machine...
This happens all the time. And in National Abortion Federation member clinics too, not just fly-by-nights, where they do not have the equipment, they're not monitoring these women, they have people without adequate training helping with the anesthesia. Kermit Gosnell had high school dropouts. His anesthesia chart was drawn up by a 15-year-old girl that he had trained for 20 minutes. Joe Bills Reynolds in Oklahoma, the guy doing his anesthesia had been hired as a janitor. This is the kind of stuff that goes on that they don't want you to know about, because you might actually research these clinics before you trusted them. And you might actually look, every time a clinic closes, the abortion lobby's like, oh, women are losing access to safe, legal abortion. Yeah, they would say that if it was this guy, as long as they wouldn't get bad publicity. There was a clinic, where was it? Somewhere in the South, Mississippi or Alabama, that nearly killed a woman. She was like 7 or 8 months pregnant. They gave her RU-486 and sent her home, in spite of the fact that her blood pressure was so high that they should have immediately hospitalized her. She nearly died. The state head of the National Organization for Women called the clinic's closure unfortunate. To them, the only bad abortion is one that doesn't happen, not one that kills the mother.
Were broken. The doctor doesn't like the noise it makes, so he didn't allow any monitoring. But this man was a Harvard fellow. He was running a Brigham and Women's department before he got fired for threatening to kill 4 of his nurses. But my daughter died during the procedure, and he didn't even notice. But a man that deals in death, I don't even think it mattered. I think he called.
And again, that happens. Patient stop breathing. Guy's oblivious, just keeps chugging right ahead and then leaves the room. I've seen it happen.
His lawyer before he called the EMTs when she finally went and got him. He couldn't resuscitate her, and the EMTs told me that rigor mortis had started to set in. Now, I don't know how long that takes, but that's how long he waited to call them, because they might have been able to resuscitate
Now,
her.
Eileen, this isn't my opinion, but I know that there's some people watching who would say, well, this is an exception. This guy he shouldn't have been practicing medicine in the first place and things like this. They'll look at this as a total anomaly. Is
No.
this something that happens more often than what people would recognize?
Absolutely, because the press keeps it a secret. They do not publish it. My story went nationwide and a local newspaper wouldn't even publish it. I think it took 10 weeks before they finally put an article about her death. And they put the other side in there too, how good abortion is. I mean, they balanced the article. It's a protected species, abortion.
Oh my gosh. The other thing that they'll do is they'll publish statements from the National Abortion Federation. Oh, abortion is just ever so safe, and this person was an outlier. Abu, the butcher of Avenue A, Hyatt, was a National Abortion Federation member in good standing. But when he got bad press, he was doing a 32-week abortion. I don't think the mother realized she was that far into the pregnancy. He was doing this late abortion, pulled off an arm, realized that the baby was not dead yet, and when they're that old, you want to let them be dead for a day or two because they're easier to take apart. So he sent the mother home. She went into labor and gave birth to a maimed baby. Well, this even made the Phil Donahue show because the mother got a lawyer who just raised hell. And the National Abortion Federation's acting like, oh, he's an outlier. He's an outlier. He was a member. He was a member. Patients came forward that he had sexually abused them and he had killed a teenage patient. And then when her mother sued, he tried to claim she'd never been a patient. He didn't have any records for her. Oh, yes, he did. And Kermit Gosnell. Oh, he was a total outlier. Now, he wasn't a NAF member, but he worked one day a week at a National Abortion Federation member clinic. The word for that is an outlier. It's employee. But the press never looks twice at that. Whatever NAF says or Planned Parenthood, they'll print it as if it's true without even bothering to fact check.
Abortion is an abortionist. They get a lot of leeway. They get a lot of slack. People turn the other way. And over 450 known deaths so far since my daughter died have been reported. Many other.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
A little confused. It's not that many deaths since her daughter died. It's that many reported. And there's Kevin Sherlock did an independent study that kind of showed how few abortion deaths the CDC counts. And there's one that comes to mind, Latasha Vial in Texas. She died in 91. She bled to death. The very next year, the doctor who did her abortion was talking about her death at a National Abortion Federation event. Now, this was a highly publicized case because her family hired a very flamboyant, media-savvy lawyer in Dallas. And this guy was a circuit rider who came down from, where was it? Missouri, I think. And he had had a dead patient there, a mentally disabled rape victim, and he gave her drugs that he should have known not to give her with her medications that she was on, and she died. So this was covered extensively in the local media in 2 states. Of course, the pro-lifers picked up on it. They're, every newsletter from, Frog Not Pro-Life to National Right to Life News is carrying it. Chris is talking about it at this meeting, and 2 CDC staffers, including Lisa Coonan, whose job it was to track abortion deaths, was there at this event where Chris was discussing it. And they counted 0 abortion deaths in the entire country of Latashi's age, range, and race. Her death couldn't have been any more obvious if she had crawled to Atlanta and died on the floor of Lisa Coonan's office with her aftercare instructions clutched in her hand, and they still didn't count her. That's infuriating.
Now, you made a statement before we went on the air that the exact year that they legalized abortion
In January,
is when they granted special, what was it?
Endangered species for the bald eagle. They took the protection off the human being and put it on the bald eagle. I just thought it was ironic. In December of '73, the bald eagle became a protected endangered species, which meant if you crushed an egg, you could go to jail because everybody knows there's a baby eagle in that egg. but everybody also knows there's a baby human being in the womb.
Wow. That's a shame. Eileen, it is just hard to believe. You know, this reminds me of Isaiah 5:20 that says in the last days he'll call evil good.
Yes, and good
and
evil.
good evil.
Absolutely.
And we see it happening in our nation.
Absolutely.
How in the world could we take a baby and just kill babies? And then the latest things that have come out through the Planned Parenthood videos where they
Horrific.
are actually selling the parts and killing them with their hearts
Or
beating.
leaving them alive to take the part. Yes, yes.
That's unbelievable.
There's a video where a tissue harvester describes being taught to cut, the bones are still soft at that age, to cut the baby's face open with surgical scissors to get its brains out when that baby was still alive. It was killed by having its face cut open with surgical scissors. They don't want you to know this.
So what kind of a response do you get, Eileen? It seems like people ought to respond to this and recognize and be sympathetic towards you, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if you haven't gotten a lot of hate mail and rejection over this.
Well, they don't have my address, so I'm not getting the hate mail, but as I said, when I was doing my investigation, I got the people I had to talk to find out what happened and why my daughter died were very hateful. In the office, the doctor's office, the medical professionals. Yes, you're right. There's a lot of people out there. But thank God I do get letters of babies whose lives were saved because they heard Laura's story, or someone will call me and say this girl chose to give birth or have given the baby up for adoption because they heard your story about Laura. So that's what gives me great joy. The Lord has brought beauty out of the ashes of my daughter's death by the good that he is bringing. Only by the grace of God could I sit here and even talk to you. I wanted to lock myself in my bedroom and go in a fetal position, and the Lord sent me out to the nation to tell my story so I can make a change and touch our nation. My passion is for the pastors. My heart is to get the pastors, to wake them up to the issue of abortion, because the pulpit is silent. It's the first thing I realized. When was the last time, we're very active in church planting, evangelism. When was the last time I heard a sermon on abortion? Never.
Okay, I gotta say, I don't think I'm more of a follower of liturgical churches where they make sure they cover all the scriptures, and if it happens to apply to abortion, you cover it. But I don't think having a specific, okay, today the sermon's gonna be abortion. I think that needs to be in the Sunday school classes, in the youth groups, in the young adult, where they abortion-proof these young women. It's entirely possible to do. They just have to realize the sales tactics that are going to be used, and that you can act out of that fight or flight. And think about times in your life when you've been scared or panicking and you did something that just made the situation worse, and you're like, why did I do that? Because you just felt like you had to do something, and you did something that was the opposite of helpful. You know, the girls need to be taught so that they are immune to these sales tactics.
Maybe I heard the word in the one sentence between adultery and gluttony. That might have been the airplay that it got, but I said we need to wake up the church to the sanctity of life, to the value of life, what abortion is. It's a tool of the enemy, destroying God's creation.
There are a lot of ministers who approach controversial issues like this, and they just say that we aren't going to minister on this, we aren't going to do anything, we don't want to drive anybody away, we don't want to offend anyone, we're just going to preach the gospel, and as people learn about their relationship with God, then all of these things, such as abortion, homosexuality, etc., will just be taken care of. How would you
I wish
respond?
that was true, because my daughter was raised in church. I would not be sitting here today if going to church and hearing the gospel preached would end this, because it hasn't. It's gotten worse. As you said, 60 million people now have died through abortion. I think the church has failed
She's talking 60 million babies.
their congregations by keeping this secret. And they have many reasons and many excuses, but
And I think it's up to 62 million or 65 million in the United States alone since Roe.
I believe it's a duty of every Bible-believing Christian, the sanctity of life. Proverbs 24:12, the Lord says, woe to you if you see someone being drawn to slaughter and you do nothing. Mm-hmm. Woe to you, doesn't the Lord who sees your heart and know, will he not give recompense for that? I mean, that says it all to me. These babies are being led to slaughter, and we sit in silence in the church.
and we vote for people who support abortion. I just
Yes.
don't understand how Christians can justify doing this.
Yeah.
Boy, given a chance, man, I'd promote life every single time you can.
Amen. I think there's going to be more power. I mean, I believe in legislation. We're trying to pass a Laura's Law right now in Massachusetts that'll clean up the clinics so this won't happen.
So this is not.
Oh, the pro-choice movement will fight tooth and nail against anything to clean up clinics. When the Miami Herald did a series about Dadeland in Florida, this place was absolutely disgusting. The oxygen masks had lipstick on from the previous patients. There's blood on the operating table. One woman died. And Janice Compton Carr, the Florida Abortion Council, said, "In my gut, I am completely aghast at what goes on in that place, but I am staunchly opposed to any effort to correct this situation in law." They would rather have the seedy, disgusting, bus station men's room quality abortion clinics. They're willing to tolerate that because the abortion clinic is more important than the woman walking into it.
Named after your daughter?
Yes. But I think it's changing people's hearts, and it's only going to be the power of God and the Holy Spirit convicting us. And I think my burden is to wake up the church. You know, I'm not involved in legislation because I want to bring the message to the church. I think there's more power in the church to change people's hearts.
Well, the church has a huge influence.
Absolutely.
And there are millions and
Okay, it seems at this point she's just going to keep talking about religious things. And I'm going to backtrack and talk about something she didn't talk about, which is how she found out about this. She and her husband were at home one evening, September 13th, 2007, I think. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. The phone rings, the caller ID has Laura's number on it, and they're expecting a call from Laura. So Eileen answers it, and it's Laura's friend sobbing hysterically, saying something about abortion and not breathing. And Eileen's trying to make sense of this, and a doctor takes the phone and says, "I'm sorry, she's gone." And pro-choice groups don't care. They absolutely freaking do not care. They would rather have things like this happen than have it be a little bit less convenient to arrange an abortion. They would rather have this happen than cut into the profit margin. They have no conscience whatsoever when it comes to what happens to the women. And it's not that they completely don't care. They would prefer that the abortion be safe. It's just that the safety isn't important enough for them to make it a priority. It's nice if you can get it, but you're not going to make a big deal of it. You know, you would not bypass an ice cream shop if they didn't put sprinkles on the ice cream. You wouldn't raise a stink about an ice cream shop in town that didn't put sprinkles on ice cream. And that is about how seriously the abortion lobby takes abortion safety. It's sprinkles on the abortion sundae. It's not to them an integral part of abortion services. Now, National Abortion Federation does provide training. Planned Parenthood does provide clinical guidelines. They do tell you, follow these, follow these, follow these. But there's no repercussions if you don't. They don't freaking care. They don't really care. And that's the big takeaway from this.